G'day everyone! Today I am super excited because today I am going to be hopefully building the first wall inside my bus. Now that may not sound very much to some people, but it's a big deal for me because I've had this bus for a little over a year now, and a lot of it has just been kind of stripping the bus out, patching up things, doing repairs, and getting the basic structure of the inside ready. And now I'm finally able to start building furniture and interior walls, and it's very exciting. So my job for today is to build the first walls that I'm going to be putting right up the front behind the driver and the passenger seats. So this is where I'm talking about building the walls. There'll be one wall here, which will be just a little bit wider than the back of the passenger seat. And then in line with that on the other side, there'll be another wall, which will be a little bit wider on this side. And I've already worked out, you can see here, I've actually drawn a line on the floor where the bottom plate of the wall needs to go. And if I show you what I've done here, so this bottom plate needs to line up with that line. So that's where the bottom plate needs to go, and I've worked that out based on where the wall needs to go in order to get around the back of the passenger seat here, because if I come around this side, you can see the back of the passenger seat, there's not really a lot of room left in there, and I need to be able to get my wall cladding, which is 12 mil, behind that. So this is where the base plate needs to be. And I've already cut, you can see I've done a bit of fancy cutting to get around this trim. I mean, I could have just done a straight piece and just gone over the top of the step trim, but just in case I want to remove this down the track at any stage, I just thought it'll be easier to just build the wall around that, so I'll still be able to get this out if I need to. So I've just cut my bottom plate to shape here so that it fits around the trim and goes all the way across. And so I can now screw this down into the floor and then build my walls up from that. Okay, so my bottom plate is in, and now I'm going to put in the top plate, which is this piece here, and it's just sitting there for the moment so you can see where it's going. So what I'm planning to do is put a spacer block in the middle here that I can screw up into the ceiling timbers, and then I'll be able to screw my top plate into that, so it'll be nice and secure in the middle. And then on the edges here, it's a little bit tricky because if you come around this side, there isn't really anything you can screw the end of this up into. I could screw it back here a little bit into this, but as you can see, there's a bit of a gap. So it's a little bit awkward. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I've actually got some angle brackets that I'm going to attach onto here. So I'll be able to screw them into the timber here. And then I've got some little bolts that will hopefully fit through the brackets that I'll be able to bolt around this air conditioning duct here, and that should secure it pretty well, hopefully. And then my studs will be, you know, joining the two plates, so it should all be nice and secure if it works the way I think it will. Let's see. Okay, so to secure the ends, I've got these just galvanized angle brackets, and what I'm thinking is if I can screw these up into the timber, and then I can actually just bend these a little bit to get them into shape. Just bend them out a little bit so they sit a little bit better like that. So I can sit them up there like that, and I'll be able to screw them up into the timber. And rather than just using screws, I've actually got some little bolts that will fit through the holes, and so I'll be able to drill through there and bolt it through to secure it onto the ducting here. So I've got my brackets screwed into the timber, and now what I'm going to do is drill a couple of holes through here, and then secure it with my little bolts. Haha, now we're cooking. Okay, well there's my top plate. I'm actually pretty happy with it. I'm putting a fair bit of pressure on that and it's not moving, so I'm pretty happy that it's secured. This particular wall doesn't have to support a lot of weight structurally, so yeah, I'm really happy with that. That's nice and secure. So now I've got my top plate and I've got my bottom plate. I can go ahead and put studs in. The stud is in. Does it look straight? So I know a lot of people are going to be asking me why I chose to use timber in my build instead of something like aluminium, which is becoming a lot more popular for bus conversions. And really in the end, it just came down to personal choice. There are pros and cons for using timber and there are pros and cons for using aluminium. Now, aluminium is certainly a fantastic material to build frames and furniture in for buses because it's lightweight for its strength, and these days with the different plug and play systems that you can get, like Q-Block, I think Bunnings has one called Connected or something similar, where you basically have just ordinary aluminium tubing, but it comes with a whole bunch of different plastic joiners that you can use to connect that tubing in all sorts of ways to make framing and furniture and so on. So when I was choosing materials for my bus conversion, it basically came down to three main factors. And the first one being, what sort of look was I after? What sort of materials do I like the look and the feel of? The second one was weight. Obviously, I'm trying to keep the weight of this build down as much as possible, so I'm trying to use lightweight materials wherever possible. And the third one is cost, because I'm on a limited budget. I don't have a huge amount of money to spend, so I have to be mindful when I'm choosing materials that it is something that I can afford. So when it came to deciding for the framing whether to go with the timber or the aluminium, those were basically the three things that I had in mind. So firstly, the look of the material. Now I much prefer, this is a personal choice, but I prefer the natural kind of rustic look of timber compared to something like aluminium. I know that's a personal choice. Some people like the nice, sleek, shiny effect that you can get from using metal and composite panels and those kinds of things. I prefer the more natural, rustic look of timber. And also timber is much easier for me to work with than metal. So that was like a personal choice why I preferred to go with timber. So the second factor that I considered when deciding between the timber or the aluminium was weight. Now, obviously, one of the main reasons why people like to use the aluminium is because it's super lightweight for its strength. But I actually compared the weight of the 25mm square tubing that most people are using versus the weight of the 42 by 19mm pine pieces that I'm using for my framing, and the weights were very similar. The aluminium was a fraction lighter for a given length of that size compared to the timber, but the difference was very small. Overall, even if you account for the whole build, it wasn't going to make a huge difference weight-wise. Now, obviously, if I was using much thicker, heavier timbers to do the framing in my bus, then obviously that would weigh a lot more than doing the same thing out of aluminium. But I'm not using those heavy timbers. I'm using just the small 42 by 19mm, which is adequate for most of the things that I'm going to be building in the bus. And the third factor that I had to consider was cost. Now, the aluminium system can be quite expensive if you get it from somewhere like Bunnings, because the price that Bunnings puts on their lengths of tubing is quite high. But if you were to get that tubing from an aluminium supplier such as Caprol or Ulrich Aluminium, there's a few different ones around, it's actually a little bit cheaper than getting it from Bunnings. And when I compared the price of doing that versus the price that I'm paying for my pine framing, it was actually pretty similar. It was almost the same price for per meter for a length of aluminium versus a length of my pine. So that side of the cost there was very little different. But when I started to add up the cost of all the plastic joiners that I would need to connect the aluminium tubing, those joiners are a couple of dollars each. And when you start to add up exactly how many you need just to build something, like a cabinet or a wall frame, they add up pretty quickly. And so when you factor that in, the cost of using the aluminium system was going to be a lot more than the cost of using the pine. I also had some questions about just how strong that aluminium system is when the connectors joining it are just made from plastic. So, it doesn't matter how strong your aluminium tubing is, that system is only as good as its weakest link, which is the plastic joiners. So I had some questions about whether they would be strong enough over time, especially for anything that needs to support a little bit of weight. And I just know from speaking with people that have used that system that there are some situations where those plastic joiners alone are not strong enough, and you do have to reinforce corners and things with extra angle brackets, which you have to rivet in and so on. So you need to consider the cost of all those little extra pieces as well. So at the end of the day, for me, there was no benefit to me to use the aluminium to save on weight, and because it was going to be cheaper for me to use the timber, and I prefer the natural look of timber, and it's easier for me to work with, that's the way I decided to do it. I'm not saying it's the best way, it's just for me, that was a personal choice. It suits me to do my framing out of timber. else gets so excited about building a wall. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out. It is actually really solid. I don't think it's going to come apart anytime soon. Eventually I'm going to be cladding it with tongue and groove pine down the front here. At some stage I'm going to be putting another noggin in here somewhere, but I'm leaving that for now until I've decided exactly what I'm doing with this area behind the wall, because I'm probably going to be building some storage into here which will attach to the back of this. So when I work out exactly how I'm building that, I'll know the best height to put that noggin, so I can use that for attaching things to as well. But for now, this is as much as I need to do, and my next job is to frame out the bed, which is going up against this wall in this section here. So I'm looking forward to getting on with that.